Welcome to a Day in the Life video series from your therapy source with your host, Margaret Rice.
All right, welcome. I want to welcome Allison to our interview today for a day in the life, and she is an occupational therapist. Thank you for joining. And why don't we start out? Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I am Allison Mazurek, and I am a school-based occupational therapist. I also have my own business called OT Time, where I primarily do parent coaching. I also do presentations locally. I'm in Kentucky. So I do presentations for parents, caregivers, trying to help children with disabilities. So kind of doing that from an OT lens. And that's something I really enjoy. Probably the most is speaking directly with caregivers, parents. I'm maybe an odd one out, but I enjoy the IEP meetings. I enjoy kind of educating all the professionals on how we can do better for a child.
Yeah, I think that sounds amazing. Personally, I think that's a role that we need to be doing more of, actually, because parents are with kids all day long, especially little ones, and much more than what we're spending with them 30 minutes here and there. So it's an excellent model. What made you choose to go down that path?
Of the parent coaching.
Yes.
So I really enjoy the school-based OT. I think that it's really neat to see a child in their environment where they need to be successful. And then I would sit through a lot of IEP meetings and hear the other side from parents. And I would hear they're totally different at home, or we never have this problem or this challenge, or this is going great at home and there's that challenge at school. So I felt like if I had tapped into the other side of things, the child who really needs to be successful at home too, or what's going on there, it really seemed more holistic, which is really at the heart of our OT. So I felt as if I still wanted to do both. I wanted to be in school and I wanted to help parents. So if there was a way to sort of do that as best I could, that seemed like a good balance to me. So that's where I kind of added the parent coaching and still do the presentations, around town for different, sometimes I'm at a daycare to help the staff. Sometimes we have a new art group here and they had reached out to ask about how to help neurodivergent children at their art camp, which I thought was really neat. So kind of the way that I came into schools and came to parents, really also sort of went into the community a little bit. And so I live in a small town, and I think that has really been a neat way to branch out and sort of show how OT can help kids and parents in different realms of their life.
Excellent. Now, do you work full time as a school-based OT, or that's part-time and then you balance it with the parent coaching?
Right. So I do part-time in the schools. I'm kind of like 75% of my week I spend in schools during the school year. And then maybe 25% I'll do the parent coaching or the presentations for my business when school is in session. And then kind of on the breaks, it sort of shifts to the other side of things. So I'm doing more of my business on those breaks. Our school year operates a little differently. We do year-round school. So we have three-week breaks, and then we have a 6-week break in the summer. So I can kind of shift things as I need to. And then inevitably on the breaks, there's something I do for school. There may be like a preschool evaluation of somebody transferring in through First Steps. So it's kind of neat to be able to sort of shift that balance on off times when school is not as much need and there's more time I can devote to my business.
Yeah, that makes sense. It seems like it is an even-keeled balance for you then, especially with that school calendar. That does make it a little easier to have that side business. How many kids do you treat on a given day when you're in the schools?
About between 6 and 8, I would say. I am the only OT for a very small district, so I'm sort of privileged that way. There's only 2 schools in our district. Technically, I'm the OT for pre-K up through 12th grade. I don't have a lot of high schoolers on my schedule right now, so I can really spend most of my time at our school that's pre-K through 8th grade. And I don't have much travel time within the buildings or anything. So that, it's a huge perk to my job. I know that not a lot of school-based OTs have that, but I can, see 6 or 8 kids, and there's not travel time. There's nothing that's really impeding that. It's just one building. So
That's a very nice setting. Now, do you have your own OT room? Then you're really living large.
I know, right? I have a space that has, it's a small office that I could call an OT room if I needed to see children there. I primarily do push-in therapy. So most of the time I'm in the classroom. Seems to make more sense to me to kind of help them when they're having the challenge. It is nice to have the space for when I work with children who have emotional regulation challenges, and sometimes we just need to go somewhere else. But it's also nice to have that space because, there's a big sign on the door, and I tell kids who I see even in the classroom, if you need a break, you can tell your teacher, and this is a space you can come if they can call me first. So I like that they can have somewhere to go as a little bit of a safe space. Sometimes even quiet corners in classrooms can get a bit overwhelming. So I always tell the teachers, like, if I'm there, they're welcome to be there.
Now, that's a nice setup, and it's easy for the students then if they're aware and they're independent and able to make that decision to ask for themselves to come.
Right.
Excellent. What would you say? Well, let me go back. So
Mhm.
you said you spend most of your time pre-K through 8th grade, correct?
Yes.
And does your caseload pretty much stay the same throughout the whole year, or does it vary at all?
It pretty much stays the same. I'll say that this year there was sort of some interesting challenges that came up with we have it's a daycare within our building that starts from children ages 2, I think, you can come if you're 2 years old through 5 years old, not kindergartners. So preschool will come and get those kids for 3 hours out of the day. And they were having some challenges with some students. So I was able to come in there and make some changes and some modifications, some suggestions to that staff. That was sort of a new area for me. I was glad they were receptive to it. There's still maybe some work to be done, but so that I would say would perhaps be the only addition throughout the year. It's pretty much the kids I see regularly for their IEP minutes. Rarely, but sometimes when you're discharging a child, that will get change it a little bit, but pretty much, it kind of stays around the same mark, about 30.
And with your calendar, with the 3 weeks off and the school and then the longer break, where does your annual goal end? At the end of the school year, or is it different?
The way we do it is we do it over a 12-month, time period. So even though that could sometimes end, in October, we're signing the IEP for 12 months. We tend to write the time we're seeing a child, the amount of times per month, so that when those breaks kind of fall, they typically don't fall within a whole month. So the way that they are, we try, let's say it was 4 times a month and we are going to have 1 or 2 of those weeks off, I try to shift and see them 4 times still that month. And then when we come back, another 4, because the weekly minutes just wouldn't really work out for us as well. And then I haven't really had any children who qualify for extended services over the summer, so we haven't really gotten into that yet. But we do it over 12 months.
Okay, but not ending. They don't all end at the same time.
Correct. They don't.
So you're writing IEPs throughout the whole school year.
Yes, in our district.
Okay.
We tend to have a lot right now that expired in May. So that tends to be a crunch time, but I think it's sort of similar for a lot of districts. But yeah, they're kind of expiring all throughout the year for us.
Okay. And then how do you find time in your schedule to meet, to discuss what the child's goals are? Do you create the child's goals independently, or is the team collaboratively meeting to establish those goals? How does that work in your district?
That's a great question. When I first started in my district, I felt a pressure to come up with my own goals. I think because I wanted to show that, OT value and really kind of separate myself. And I think I pretty quickly realized it needs to be collaborative. It needs to be what's happening with that child and the struggles that happen in the classroom, not just our OT sessions if it wasn't going to be in the classroom. So I quickly began to shift and really get to know each of the teachers really well so that we could have that rapport and the relationship. And then I think it was not too long ago that AOTA came out with a statement paper saying, you know, we really need to work closely and those goals need to be collaborative with the teachers. So as best practice, I try to follow that a lot of times, and I'm happy about this. I'll have teachers come to me and say, what do you think we most need to work on for this skill? And so we really will sit down and write that goal together. A lot of times I'll have a teacher text me and just say, hey, can you come down during my planning? And I love that, you know, that we could sit there and chat about that. And also, I don't want to just come up with a data, you know, 80% of times that may not be realistic for the teacher to gather. So, you know, she or he can have the input on that side. And then I can kind of explain why we would want to have this skill better for classroom work. So yeah, it has been really collaborative.
And fitting that into your schedule because you're doing more of you know, 4 times a month, or you have room in your schedule in order to meet with those other providers. Am I correct in saying that?
Yes, I usually have room, whether they're kind of messaging me throughout the day, I can kind of say, hey, I'll catch you at your planning time. It doesn't always work. Sometimes it happens over email if it's a super busy week or something. But I try to make that a priority because I do think it's really important to do that. And then go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Just the other, like, I try to attend as many meetings as I can when I'm invited by teachers or special ed director. That can get a little tricky when you're trying to see students at a certain time for reading or writing in the classroom. But overall, I try to prioritize those as well. So.
Now you mentioned when you're setting goals and how you're collecting data on them. Are you collecting the data, or are the teachers collecting the data? A little bit of both. And when you say you're collaboratively writing those goals, to confirm, you don't have a separate OT goal.
Correct.
Okay.
I think it's both. So we're both collecting the data. We've recently had a shift in the data program that our district uses. So that has kind of become something that I'm tracking individually. I wish I had a little better program for that, but I know we're going to shift some things in our district. So the teachers have a separate program that they use, and then I kind of have to use my own. So when it's time, like before the IEP meeting, I'll kind of explain, here's what I had tracked. It might look a little different chart than yours, but we compare those and we expect differences because I might be seeing the child, well, I usually am one-on-one, or I'm next to him or her at their desk, and the teacher has to deliver that instruction to a whole group or to a small group. So, and I always tell parents that in our IEP meetings, like these numbers are going to look different, and a lot of times my numbers might look better, but that instruction is happening so individualized and being condensed into a short period of time versus a teacher has the whole day to find, you know, more challenges or things the student needs to work on, and it's not so individualized. So we will see differences, but they're still hopefully able to see progress.
Right. And that's valuable data because, you know, when we think of motor learning, we do realize that in a situation like you're saying, the child may succeed better when you're there providing perhaps prompts or other things. But when they're expected to do it completely on their own in a different environment, you know, we don't expect them to do as well. That's the big picture. Exactly. But that it's nice to see improvement in that smaller picture, you know, just so that parents and teachers do see that they're making progress. So it does make sense there, even from a motor learning perspective of why you're going to see the differences as well.
Absolutely.
And do you report quarterly on your goals? So home to parents, or how does that work?
I really should come home quarterly with the report cards. So sometimes I'll just write a narrative because our systems aren't exactly talking to each other right now. And usually the teachers will provide that graph or data. But I tend, you know, and most parents have been happy with just a narrative of kind of what's happening. Sometimes like sometimes data points, but not so much like a big graph that we would do at an IEP meeting and kind of show what's going on there. So
I want to leave some time to talk about your parent coaching. So one more question about school-based OT.
sure.
What do you find is your biggest struggle right now as a school-based OT?
I would say that there are a lot of students being recommended to OT from an emotional regulation standpoint, and teachers feel they don't have any tools left. So they're saying, what can we do? Can we get this child evaluated by OT? And I don't know what to blame that on. I don't know if there's necessarily needs to be something to blame, but a lot of people want to say children had been away from other kids for so long, and COVID and all these things. It tends to be the younger children who are I'm receiving these requests for evaluations for. So that it's a lot of kids who seem to be needing more emotional regulation need.
Okay, yeah, makes sense. I think that's the case across the whole country right now. So like you
Yeah.
said, not sure where it's coming from, but it's just everybody's experiencing that. So moving on to your parent coaching aspect of being an OT, how do
Yes.
you provide those services? Do you go into their home? Is it via, a Zoom meeting or in person? How does that work?
So I've actually offered it in a bunch of different ways, and most people take me up by phone. They tend to like to listen to what I'm saying and take notes. And I think a couple of the parents I talked to said, "Well, I just want to have all this in front of me and be able to do that." So I think maybe they felt more comfortable that way. A lot of the parents that I have worked with, we've met. We didn't know each other, but like the last one, we actually met at a playground. My kids were playing, and her son was playing, and eventually comes out, "Oh, where do you work? What do you do?" And so we start chatting, and she immediately started asking a bunch of questions about her son's IEP and where this should go and what else it should have. And so I had to say, "Well, actually, I'm a parent coach. I would love for you to contact me, and we can talk more about this." While our kids are like, "Let's go."
Right, right.
So, yeah, it just kind of naturally happens sometimes out there in the community. Sometimes you get a great recommendation, which is nice, but the last few have been by phone. But I can definitely offer it virtually. And then I don't have a physical office space, so I've offered to parents, it can be somewhere if you're comfortable, like at a coffee shop or something like that, but I don't have an office right now. So
And so basically you're saying in terms of getting new clients, it's word of mouth, it's people you're meeting in your community, you're out and about, you're not actively advertising or doing
right.
anything to get those clients, and it's working for you, which is great, really great.
It's working fine. If I had wanted to ramp it up even more, I think there's other routes I could do, but I also have a 4 and a 6-year-old. And so that's
Right. It's a
the
lot
other
to
part of my
juggle.
job.
Yeah. So how do you balance that? How do you balance really 3 jobs? Do you find that difficult?
At times, yes. I think something about having the breaks and having summer, it's a nice shift of things. So it sort of feels new to me every so often. And I think that helps. It was really challenging when we were not in school, because it felt like, well, and everything was through the computer, whether it was school or whether it was the business. And that was really hard because my family was here too. And so that was impossible to balance. Luckily, we're not doing that right now. But sometimes I think I just need some time, and I can schedule a day off. I do have the flexibility to do that. So I know burnout from other times in my life, and I don't want to let my OT career get there because I love it, and I want to keep it that way. So
Good, excellent. It does sound like you're juggling a lot, and thankfully all the restrictions and COVID and everything is over. That was a hard time. So maybe things do seem easier now just because of what you
yes,
went through.
maybe that's true.
Yes. So one more final question I'd like to ask. If you could share your favorite success story, without giving any super identifying information, but maybe some success story you had with a student or yourself, of, what you learned from a student with us, that would be great.
Mhm. I always think of, and it happened fairly recently, actually, within the last 6 months. We have so I'm in preschool a lot. I'll spend sometimes half the morning there because I have a lot of students who are in there. And we have a lot of students who are sometimes in the middle of a diagnosis with, family trying to get that. And sometimes families not ready to go and have that. And sometimes families are totally comfortable with it. So we have a lot of students who are kind of at different stages. And I think they benefit from being around each other. But sometimes it's just a lot for little people. So the preschool classroom is about 13 kids, and they have a very structured routine, and they have a nice visual schedule. The teacher is great about this. And every day after lunch, they do a little story time, and then they do their centers and they go outside. And this is the routine, unless it's raining or something. And so we have some students who adore this routine. And one day, this student, everybody was getting lined up to go outside, and they do their backpack and their folder, and everything happens in a certain way. And he always watches to make sure everybody else is doing their thing, and he's kind of doing his thing, but it's like part of his routine to make sure everyone's getting lined up. And so this particular day, they were not going to take their backpacks out. They were going to fill them with their folders and then walk out, because they had to come back in and do something different, which was go to music class. And that was very different. And so when this student saw the teacher, or heard the teacher say, okay, leave your backpacks here, we're going outside, it was not working for him. He was overwhelmed by that different instruction. And so luckily I was there, and he's all the students are lined up, and he's crying and screaming and backpack, backpack. And, he has limited words, but we knew exactly what he wanted. He wanted everybody to have their backpack and then walk out. And luckily, being there, and I understood and knew this student well enough to say, let's stay back, we'll take some time and we'll get it together. And in a lot simpler words than that, but he was able to stay with me and really just kind of hugged me. I think it was just a sign that he was like, you understand, I know I can't fix it. And, we talked about that a little bit. And he wanted to wear his backpack out. And I said, that's fine. When you're ready, we'll go outside. These backpacks are staying here. And he put them all in a big pile. And he was just like trying to compartmentalize, like these should be on the kids, but they're not. And so it took, maybe 2 minutes, really not that long. But I think I felt like at least he had an adult who heard him and understood him. And even though we didn't get the backpacks to the kids, I just said, when you're ready, we'll go outside. You can wear your backpack or you cannot wear your backpack. And he was like, oh, I had a choice in this thing that I felt like I didn't. And so we made it outside. And that was the benefit of having an extra adult to take the extra 2 minutes. And I think so many times those things happen when you have a busy classroom, the adult doesn't understand what's going on. And, you can have 20 kids to one adult. So just that extra benefit of, it wasn't a lot of time, it wasn't a lot of effort on my side really, but I did kind of quickly understand what was happening, and when I got outside, the preschool aide was like, what was going on, and I was just like, that's his routine, he's so used to that. And so at that point, I could communicate what happened to the preschool teacher. And I said, you have this different thing coming up, this music, you may want to take a minute or two out here on the playground before you go in to kind of explain how it'll be different. And then she said, that's a great idea. I will walk him first to music and let the aide take the rest of the class. And then he was fine, but just that little extra bit to understand where a child is coming from, I think they feel that so strongly, and I'm not saying that every time I can avert or avoid a meltdown, but, and it still happened, but it was just like, hey, I get where you're coming from. Let's do the best from here on out, and then just letting him cry or what he needed to do for a minute. So,
Right. And that 2 minutes in that preventative manner can really save many minutes if it escalates for that child. And
right.
like you said, looking through it with using your OT lens,
Mhm.
you're seeing maybe the picture a little different than other people. And sometimes I think we don't validate enough. I'm a PT, but we don't validate enough how we just watch children and observe, and we're looking at it from a different lens than a teacher who's obviously looking at it from a more educational lens. We're looking at it, like you said, maybe a more well-rounded, or not better, just different.
Right. Exactly.
And those little things that you're calling little things are actually big things. We blow them off, but other people see them as,
Right.
yeah. And it sounds like an excellent lesson in co-regulation too, for
Yeah. And I
these
think
children.
that's what really helped, a good professional that can hand it off to the teacher and say, he kind of summarize that really briefly and just say, it's not that I did all the right things, but you might want to consider this moving forward. And when super receptive teacher, and she did, and she ended up, taking him to music, and everything was okay, even though it was different,
Right.
so.
Excellent. These are wonderful success stories of how we're helping students on a daily basis. Like I said, doesn't have to be anything humongous. These are the
Mhm.
things that add up to success for students.
Right.
So, is there anything else you'd like to share before we finish up?
I don't think so. Just, I think it's important to keep the passion in our field, because especially when we work with kids, they can feel that, whether if it's there or not. And I like being known in the building as Miss Allison, and knowing, that's a safe place, or she helps me with this. And I think I'm very lucky to have this job.
It sounds like it. It sounds like you have a great setup to balance having something where you're working directly with parents, which is huge, as we know, and then
Mhm.
still getting to work in the school districts too, directly with those kids and teachers. You probably have a really great perspective on children in general, because you're seeing it from so many, and as a mom, so you're seeing
Yeah.
it from so many different sides, which is really cool. So thank you very much for joining us. This was great, and I really appreciate your time. Have a good rest of the day.
Thank you so much. You
All
too.
right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining your therapy source for this Day in the Life series hosted by Margaret Rice. Visit yourtherapysource.com for more information to help students succeed.